No, I thought that was very interesting. I was going to ask you about one thing, which it took me a long time to realize, which is, you learn throughout your life, but very often it's compartmentalized into courses or like separate sort of little tidbits that you learn and you think, okay, now I've learned that. Lately, I'm exploring these different note-taking apps. I was curious as to whether your solution includes note-taking and to what degree it does. Because I'm exploring right now Rome Research and Notion and a few other of these more contemporary note-taking apps. And the reason why is, at least in my own learning journey, I realized I do need to be actively writing down ideas. And these ideas happen at very odd moments. I mean, typically when I run, after about 12 and a half minutes, I get all these ideas. So these apps that you have to be extremely accessible. So there's this trade-off between having these fantastic learning systems, but that may be hard to access, and then having something that's incredibly simple that you can actually type on, which is in my case, my phone, right? And it has to be an app that shows up immediately because my hands are sweaty and I really don't want to stop. Or it could be a dictaphone, or I just record it. So give us a sense of when you thought about designing sort of the perfect learning system and the perfect learning technology, what went into your mind? And to what extent is sort of note-taking and sort of personal reflection part of this learning?
So I think that we went through an evolution where we made a lot of mistakes and realized we had to be less extreme. So I think in the beginning, a lot of our research went into trying to find some sort of optimal situation. It might not be a universal optimal, but like what's the optimal learning way for every person? And then we did a lot of research about the individual, social, and collaborative exercises and the kinds of flows. Should a particular exercise be administered first to optimize learning? And then I think we also made some mistakes around thinking that either you're digital or you're analog. And I think even at Aalborg, we don't even use the terminology analog anymore because it's no one is analog in any situation. We're constantly also, even if we're doing something physical, touching a paper, we're usually connected in some other capacity at the same time. But I think in the beginning, we thought that if it's digital, it's digital. And then we knew that teachers liked downloadables. They'd like to write it in their hand. And we said that will pass. We don't want to build a system that's outdated from the beginning. But we've reversed on that point. So we're actually implementing a series of changes now where any exercise that can be done digitally can also be downloaded and can also be done by hand, so that the templates can be used in a series of different ways. And with that, note-taking will come as well, because I know from myself and the way that I learn is I've always had this idea that if I write it down, I can remember it forever. And of course, that's not entirely true, but I know from experience that if I write something by hand, I remember it a lot more because I'm processing it. I'm not writing the same thing. I'm taking notes, but I'm changing it and interpreting it at the same time. And I actually use something which is a kind of in between, which is Mont Blanc created this one where it's still real paper. So I'm writing on paper, but there's a tablet behind. And even for me, that optimizes my learning more than using some of these other, like just an iPad, or I think they're called Remarkable. And there's a couple of different ones where you're actually still writing, but on a tablet. And I don't personally learn as much from doing it like that.
That's funny. I just have finished one of these. They're called Rocketbook. I don't know if you've seen those. So I've just used, but I've used the version that is truly, it's paper. It's just that you can scan it a little easier because it has like edges on it. The only thing is I've found that I don't really need the scans because, my notes aren't particularly helpful. I mean, my handwriting is horrendous. So I think the point here at some point isn't really the notes. I do go back to my notes, but I find that my handwritten notes sometimes, they are very meaningful in the moment, and I do think they do something. But when I go back, they are slightly less useful, or they're at least at a very more abstract level, because I can't decode every little thing that's written in there. It's more of a general sense. Anyway, yeah. I think that learning is, at least we think it is, very personal. But do we overthink it as learners? Is it actually much less personal? I mean, at the end of the day, it is a generic process that we all go through.
I think that what has surprised me is that there are clear trends that go across almost all of our learning systems that are the same, which are that all of the social exercises where people interact with others in real time are the most popular everywhere. So whether it's, again, a refugee camp, whether it's corporate learning, whether it's young or old, the true preference is for social learning activities. And we found this out about a year and a half ago, where, and it was a bit of a fun process where we learned so much from it that we didn't realize when we set out to build it. But we had a biology teacher come to us and said, Sarah, it's great that you guys have now over 50 learning templates for different kinds of pedagogical exercises, but I just really like biology. I don't necessarily know if I should do a baseline test or if it should be a structured or unstructured interview questions for my self-reflection journal. I geek out about biology, not learning. So I need some sort of guide here. Like, does a particular exercise fit a particular piece of content better? Is there a flow? And of course, I could start by saying, with some, there's a clear flow. Like a baseline test only works at a specific time of a learning journey. So yes, there are some things like that. And he said, well, you guys have gamified so many other ways of building the course. It could be nice if there was some sort of guide to me about what to pick. And then we implemented these 3 different recommendations, and it was quite simple to do. One is about what's trending in my learning environment. So when you factor for how much it's offered and how much it's taken, is actually the most popular type of activity that we offer. Then we grouped all of our learning systems by industry and said, what is the most popular learning activity in your industry? And finally, a unique recommendation depending on where you are in your course building flow, or a particular type of content that may fit a particular type of exercise well. So after we implemented that, we have a ton of data, and we can see that the top 3 to 5 on every solution we have, and I'm speaking about between 200 and 250, it's all activities such as debate, oral presentation, discussions, role-playing. It's all those very, very non-scalable activities that we actually assumed that corporate learners didn't want to do. So we assumed, because almost all corporate learning you've seen is quizzes and very, very short answer type things. We assumed that the corporate learners would be too busy and they're doing it sort of on the fly and they wouldn't want to take part in these activities. But that is actually not the case. And of course, that pattern's become even clearer with COVID, but it was quite clear before as well.
I find that interesting. I think that sometimes when people use the term social learning, it's really hard to understand what that means, because it's been so embedded and mixed up with kind of social media. Explain what the difference is, because, and I've seen many of these kind of learning systems online, and they really are just social learning means you learn in a group, and it's like you have, and I don't want to name social networks here, but basically you have X little discussion on one of these very popular social networks. But what you're talking about is actually more analog to what I remember in my upbringing in the best of teachers that really managed to get us doing a serious group project and then present it in front of an audience and get real critique, I guess, around the presentation. These things are, like you pointed out, they are very, very social, but they're social in the original sense of social. They're not online social. They're not just quizzes.
No, and what's been difficult about them is actually to find scalable ways of hosting it digitally. But I'll get back to how some of these things are being navigated with tech. I think we try to differentiate between what we would call a direct social learning experience and an indirect. So to me, the social networking is only an indirect social experience, in the sense that a forum or a social newsfeed gives you insights about that there are other people and that they're learning, or they may be sharing what they're doing, and you may have some sort of not face-to-face, not real-time interaction with them. And it's not to say that that's not valuable, because I think if we look back at some of the first research reports that came out about Coursera and Khan Academy and Udemy, when we began to see research on that, was that people often felt that they were alone in their learning experience. They would log on to some sort of learning platform, end up inside a course and then never see another person. And that's very demotivating. So I think that sort of social layer, the social networking layer, does enable you to find role models and mirror other people's behavior, but that's not really, to me, where the actual learning takes place. It takes place in a direct social connectivity with another person, while, the way I would see it, conducting some sort of pedagogical exercise in collaboration. That to me is the true essence of social learning.